Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me for another of my interview series. Today we're looking at the problems with schools. I'm going to be talking to Emma Hardy, who is a home educator now but was a teaching assistant at I think it was a secondary school. I can't remember. Yes, she's nodding in the background, waiting to come on. Yes, a secondary school. However, schools are very different, it seems, from when I was at school in the 1970s. So let's find out what the problems are and why it's going in that way. Emma, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me.
It's a pleasure, Richard.
It's lovely to have you on, and especially somebody who's been in the system and you're still sort of you're in the solution really now, aren't you? To,
Yes, hopefully, yeah.
Now, people who follow the channel may know that my girlfriend Julia has just taken her eldest son out of the secondary school. He was in the first year of a secondary school. He didn't cope. They weren't very good with him. But even from that process, I could see that there were very different things associated with the school on just, say, the digital side of things, let alone the type of stuff that they were
Mm,
educating the kids with. So I think that's the sort of area we're going to talk about.
yeah,
So, shall we talk about the digital side of things? Because you've mentioned to me an app called Class Charts,
yeah,
which the teachers, I think, have and that parents are unaware of.
yeah. Okay. So Class Charts is is an app that stores all the information about the child. So their name, they're identifiable by their class photo, their annual photograph that they have at school. Send pupil premium, safeguarding issues, um, test results, medical records, oh, some quite in depth personal information.
And this
Which,
is all digital.
yes, yeah. So this is the information that teachers and teaching assistants have access to in order to do their work. But my problem was that this information was available on staff's personal use mobile phones.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I was given access to this information on the app on my personal mobile phone without having to undergo any security measures of my personal mobile phone.
And you were a teaching assistant, not a
Yeah,
teacher who was
yeah,
fully
yeah,
fledged in the school system. So as you say, anybody could have accessed this.
yeah. You're given a secure passcode
Right.
to access the app. But that was it at the time. That was the only security measure that the app was safe, and it maybe the app is safe. However, I'm not sure that my personal mobile phone could be described as adequately secure enough to
Well,
access that
yes,
information.
I'm guessing if it's a personal phone, you could be out somewhere, leave it
Yeah,
at a cafe or something, and you come, oh, my phone, hang on a minute.
yeah,
And it's not just your personal details, but it's the personal
yeah,
details of all the students at the school,
yeah, yeah,
which is a bit barking. And in a way, this is like a primer for people getting used to having digital ID and having all
yeah.
their information. But nobody's, if I understand this right, the parents haven't been asked consent for this.
No, because when you apply to the secondary school, you're given your pack of information that you read through or you don't read through, and you sign away consent for this, that, and the other. In the small print in the other policies that you have to refer to on another document, it says that um, the information that's gathered is legally required, like I say, for staff to carry out their work. You've
Hmm.
consented to give that information, but you don't. The transparency principle doesn't mean that they have to tell you how they access that information. It's supposed to be secure, adequately secure. But the part where it can be an app on a mobile phone apparently isn't of significant importance that you don't need to know that.
Right. Gosh. And when you discovered this, did you sort of question them about it, the school and the authority?
I most certainly did. Being a parent of a child at that school, um, I obviously knew that my daughter's information was accessible on every member of staff's personal use mobile phone, which I haven't, I'm not comfortable with.
No.
And the only reason I knew that was because I was given the staff version of the app. As a parent, that was never advertised to me that's what was happening within school. That was which again is not very transparent at all, and it means that parents can't come forward and say that they're not happy with it. So yeah, so I went through the process. I raised it with the head, and they did subsequently add other features to it. They put a time limit on, so it was only accessible between Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, and then the app would switch off. They put two-way authentication onto the app. Um, Staff training: don't leave your phone around. Don't use unsecure Wi-Fi if you're in a cafe or restaurant or train station. But again, it's your personal use mobile phone. It will
Mm.
be used for personal.
So presumably the app must work that I mean, it's not storing the information on the phone itself,
No,
presumably. It's just accessing the
that's right.
school's data computer or server or whatever.
Yeah,
It just means that you do have that doorway
yeah.
into information. And I mean, is it absolutely essential? Do you think that each teacher in the school and all the associated teachers need to know if little
No,
Johnny has some mental health issues
no,
or some personal issues or what have you? Does every
no.
teacher need to know that?
It should be difficult information to access. It should be difficult to find because it
Mm,
gives you that time to think, what am I doing? Do I really need to know? Um, so I've contacted other schools in the area who are also using class charts, and they have chosen the option where it is absolutely not accessed on staff's personal use mobile phones. It's just not, they don't allow it. It's on school approved devices, uh, in school, on school Wi-Fi, um, with all the necessary security measures that school laptops and computers have.
yeah.
The head teacher and perhaps the safeguarding lead may have access on their personal use mobile phone on a need to know basis. But for the likes of somebody that was doing my job, it was
Mm.
completely and totally irresponsible to allow that information out.
And presumably, parents could ask them to, like you can, I forget what the data request is, but there's a legal data request that you can go to a company if you know that they've got biometrics or they've got photographs or any digital information about you. You can say, excuse me, I have a legal right to
I
know
think it's
what
a
you've got.
subject access
That's
request.
it. Yes, that's it. I did a video about it not so long ago. There's so many terms, but presumably parents could make that same information. Say, I'd like to actually know what information you're storing about my son or daughter on your system,
Yeah.
because there may be mistakes.
Well, funnily enough, when I left and I deregistered my eldest daughter, we're now, like I say, we're home educating. I did ask for a SAR and I got it. And it did include in there things from primary school. It said that she had burnt her fingers on some hair straighteners and that I'd called in to see how she was during the day. And that wasn't her, that was her sister. So mistakes do happen.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the machine may be infallible, which is perhaps not
Mm.
necessarily true, but with people entering the data, if you put it the wrong
Yeah,
problem with the wrong name,
yeah,
you're going to have a bigger problem. And
yeah.
then if everybody has assumed that that child might be whatever it is, a troubled child, let's say, for
Mm.
whatever reason, then that suddenly might be how you're approaching your teaching to that child, and you've got the wrong one.
Going back, sorry, Richard, going back to
Mm,
the troubled child thing, I should have mentioned this. This is a quite an important part of class charts. It's to monitor behaviour.
is it?
So that's tied into there. They when I saw one of your videos, one of the guys was saying you get your brackets of your bands of learning. Some will end up as nurses and some will end up as doctors.
Right, yes.
So that information's all on the class charts as well, but it's also tied into the behaviour. So you get merits if you're good, and you get sanctions when you disobey the rules. And obviously, when it's on staff's personal mobile phones, they can reward or punish you there and then, a bit like a Black Mirror episode where you can your score can go up or down on the
Right.
spot.
Yeah.
So all that data is then collected and it's used in artificial intelligence purposes to try to improve behavior. So certain people that are like this, that tick these boxes, need to be sat over there away from that person that ticks that boxes. And they would work better in that scenario under these conditions. So there's a lot of manipulation going on, and that data is so valuable and sensitive that if you do misbehave at school or you've made mistakes, those mistakes and that goes with you for potentially the rest of your life.
And
On,
what happens to this data? I mean, does it leave the school? Is it sent to the government on part of an overall thing for lots of different schools? All this data fed in to say, look, in this situation, these pupils are not performing quite well, or this teacher is unable to teach very well to this type of. I mean, if you've got that ability to number crunch and come out with all these different things, it seems to me that not only is this an experiment on teacher-children relationships and within the microcosm of a small school of a school,
much
but
bigger.
also you're testing a system which
Yeah,
could later on be put on for the population if you were
yeah,
trying to control them.
yeah, absolutely. It's got those digital ID mechanisms in there that are being tested out on children.
Yeah. And then, of course, that generation is being so used to being tested and manipulated and filed in that way, especially with AI doing all of
Mhm.
it, that as they grow up, if the world is also changing along those lines with them, then there's no escape.
No, it's far bigger than just the school issue. They are very watertight contracts with these multi-billion organisations that are providing the ed tech. They're untouchable and they regulate themselves.
Right. Yeah. So this
So,
is, I mean, it's very worrying. I mean, just the idea on its own, but you can
mm,
see how scaled up if many
yeah.
schools are doing. How many schools do this class charts?
Um,
Is it
I don't.
widespread?
It's global. Yeah, it's
Oh, is
massive.
it global? It's
Yeah,
not just an
yeah.
English thing or a
No,
Britain
it's
thing.
it sounds nice, and I think it was invented by a teacher, so it all sounds very low key and friendly, and but it's actually now owned by TES, I think, who
Right.
are um they're the big teaching educational facilitator it's ed tech. They are the force behind it all.
And nobody, as a parent, you're quite ignorant really of what goes on in a school. You drop your kids off, you go to work or whatever you do in your day, and you pick your kids up, hoping that they've been educated rather than manipulated
Mm,
and data sourced. It
mm,
seems to me.
mm.
This
It's uncomfortable, and I think a lot of people don't really like to think about uncomfortable things. So,
Yeah, yeah. I think we're all going to have to be thinking about uncomfortable things a lot more than we realise. One of the things that I was quite shocked and surprised by when my girlfriend's son started at secondary school, and he's now come out of that, thank goodness, is when it came to dinner money, that was all digital. And in order to access his dinner, he would use his fingerprint. So he would, I don't know, I guess on some sort of console or something, you would, and then
mm,
the money would be deducted automatically, which seemed to me, and they said, oh, well, it's for his safety, so that, that nobody's going to put the pressure on him to hand over his money to bully boys and all this sort of thing. And you think, well, if you did your job properly, you wouldn't need that anyway. But also, you're losing the opportunity to learn how money works and to be able to budget and so much more with money Whereas if it's just put your finger on here, you don't, again, it's that convenience. Don't think about those things, young man. You won't need to think about that in the future when you're enslaved in a digital hell. And it seems to me that's the thing. Was that going on at the school you were working at?
Yes, yeah. So I was aware of biometrics after seeing a Pippa King TED talk about sleepwalking into a surveillance state. She was a librarian, and they were bringing in the biometrics a good 10, 15 years ago.
Right,
And
blimey.
she was the one who actually campaigned so that you have to give your consent for biometrics now. They can't just take them, which was what they were doing when her children were at school.
Gosh. I mean,
Um,
I mean, it's been a long time since
mm,
my children were at school in the 90s. So in the space of 30 years,
mm,
this whole new way of doing things.
yeah,
And I think a lot of people are just completely
yeah,
ignorant.
yeah. So I did know a little bit about that. So I'd said no to biometrics for my daughter, and they still took them anyway on a second day of school. So they were all masked up at that point. Well, she wasn't, obviously, but the staff were, and the little year 7 children were all marched off along to go and get the fingerprints taken. And again, it just highlights that human error, mistakes do happen.
Hmm.
Let's not pretend that they don't happen, and learn from them. So yeah, so her fingerprints were still taken, and we made sure that they destroyed them, and not simply deleted them, because that's not the same thing either.
Yeah, gosh. But most of the kids presumably are still doing this. It's all
Yeah,
very easy. They're so used to mobile phones, and
yeah.
unlocking the phone with a finger, or these days now with your biometric face. Um, so this is, I mean, we were calling it digital overreach before we started talking, and it is, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's an overreach of a technology which we don't really have any knowledge of
No,
how insidious this could
no.
be.
And the school staff don't understand it either. It's
Really,
they buy the product that, again, it's easy, it's convenient, it makes their lives easier.
yeah.
It advertises themselves to do all these wonderful things that save time and make life easy, but they're clueless.
And yeah, and this is the sad thing. It's being brought in by
Mm,
people who don't understand the potential danger.
no.
If it was purely within the intranet of the school, you could understand that that's fine, and that the data perhaps at the end of each week or month was completely destroyed, so it would never go anywhere, and it was built in, so it wasn't a human had to come in and press, erase the data, that it just was built in and was as a safeguard, and it was provable that that was what happening. You could understand, okay, that's, it's modular and it doesn't leave the school, just as any paperwork
Mm,
basically wouldn't leave the school. But the fact that it is digital and it can be very easily copied and passed round, and as you say, it could follow you, your behaviour in school can be attached to your qualifications,
mm.
so
And
or influence your
exactly.
yeah,
Who's going to employers might have access to that sort of information, and that could shape the rest of your future, and
which is
that without your
without
consent.
your permission or a knowledge. Yeah, which is ridiculous because
Mm,
many kids, kids are kids,
mm,
and they may do dreadful things at school, because they may have difficulty at home life, or they may be growing up differently,
mm.
and people are born at different times of the year, and so that fits in with the school year. If you're born in September, it's very different if you're born in June,
Yeah,
and yet you may be still in the same year, but those 9 months
yeah.
apart will make a big influence. But you grow up and you get over those things. But if you've got to carry all the mistakes
Mm,
that you ever made in your
mm.
life, I mean, it's totally and utterly ridiculous.
Yeah. So they have, and it could even be somebody else's record as
And it
well.
could, yeah, exactly, which is even worse. And then you're trying to prove that it wasn't you.
So the going back to the class charts thing, so the kids and the parents do have the option of having an app of class charts for them. So this is how it's sold to the parents and children. They get an app. It's like a pie chart on their mobile phone, and it starts off green. And the more mistakes you make, that the slice of red gets bigger and bigger.
Oh, crikey.
Um, so, and obviously the good behaviour you
You're
reward as
rewarded.
well.
Yeah.
But again, if you've made a mistake, I thought personally, if you've made a mistake and it's written in your planner and it's between you and the teacher and your parents or your carer, um, it's between you. It's private.
Yes.
It's quite personal, and you can also turn the page the next week and forget about it. You don't have to revisit it. But on the pie chart on the app, that red stain, if you like, can can follow you for, it depends on what the settings are. It might be 30 days or whatever, or longer.
Right.
It might stay on there for the year. And that for some children would be quite demoralizing, especially if it's something that they felt that was unfair or they were embarrassed about. I don't think that's good for children's well-being or mental health. They're very good at providing ticky boxes for and newsletters for that sort of thing, but the actual on-the-ground stuff, I think that's quite a glaringly obvious, not a very nice thing to do for children.
And to use red as well,
Yeah,
as a measure of badness. I mean,
yeah,
red and what green for the
yeah,
other, is it? Yeah. So that
yeah.
you're already sort of giving this feeling that actually you've been really bad. And,
Mm,
and you just think back to the old days when you did something wrong
mm,
and a school teacher might have thrown the rubber across the room at you. It's quiet, folks. Stop being. Or you were made to apologise. And you would
mm,
say, oh, I'm really sorry for what I've done. And that was it. Nobody
mm,
else need. No, it's not written down or anything
mm,
like that. You've got over it. You've apologised. You've grown up. You've been a man or a woman, whatever, and that's it. Done.
mm,
And now you're saying that every mistake, and it's really sinister.
mm.
That is, it's really sinister
I mean,
because
if you have seen that episode of Black Mirror, um, it,
I,
it it's
yeah.
very, very similar.
Is it? I haven't
Very
seen it.
similar.
I got rid of my television, and I tend not to watch these sci-fi films because they seem to me now just to be conditioning us and
Mm.
grooming us for what's
Yeah.
coming down the
Well,
line.
yeah.
And I think to myself, I want to remain critical
Yeah.
and have my own ability to think. And so I'd much rather now read a book from 40 years ago
Yes. Yeah.
than
Definitely.
the
Yeah.
stuff that's coming out, because
Yeah.
everything seems to be about conditioning us for a very bleak future.
Mm.
And if this is the next generation who
Mm.
have no knowledge of anything else,
Mm.
then it's very frightening.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
And that, but so that this is the digital side of things, but it's more than that in the schools at the moment. The whole education of children has very much changed, and I know that you wanted to talk about the sex education in school, and
Yeah.
particularly down in primary school, which seems
Yeah.
to be again attacking the young really right at their early learning for stuff which is again overreach really. Could you tell us about the sort of things that they're saying to primary kids?
Yeah. So we asked for the sex education syllabus and resources that they were using at the primary school. So we found out that they were using external providers, and those external providers' lesson plans included terminology such as sex is a label that someone assigns to you at birth. There's no mention of biology or what sex is. It's a label, and I straight away didn't feel comfortable with teaching my daughter that it's a label because it's got negative connotations and it sounds like that it can be easily swapped and it might be wrong. So you might want to swap it later on or I'll switch it about. So we went and we brought that up to school and they agreed that absolutely right, we'll change that. We don't agree with that. I contacted the external provider themselves and they agreed that that was wrong and they changed it too. So after a bit of digging around, I also found out that a lot of these external providers are working in partnership with an organization called Stonewall, which many people might be familiar with. We were talking about it earlier on. It's primarily started off as a gay rights organization, And now it's morphed into something considerably different. So there's a massive influence of Stonewall, external providers that are influencing primary schools all over the country. Um, the the lessons from Stonewall, the message, sorry, from Stonewall is quite heavily LGBTQ plus and very heavy on the gender ideology. You can be whoever you choose to be. Um, Discrimination is any form of discrimination is unacceptable. So there are some parts in it that are quite confusing that sound almost reasonable, but then when you put it all together, what you're saying is that actually, if you see somebody who is presenting as the opposite sex and wants to enter your single sex facility, say a little girl is going to the toilet and a man also wants to go in that toilet, she mustn't say anything. She mustn't observe the differences because discrimination, any form of discrimination, is unacceptable. And that again is teaching children some very confusing messages. When I was growing up, I was taught to say no, that's not acceptable. I'm not comfortable, and to to make a fuss and not to just be quiet and let things continue or develop. So the messages in being taught to very young impressionable children are quite dangerous.
This is again another insidious and rather horrible development in schools. I mean, the fact that a little girl can use the toilet and then a grown-up will come in. You would imagine that a toilet, a very private space, is very much a safe area, to use those words that often come up, for the pupil, the boys and the girls, and then to say, well, it's okay for an adult to come in to use it rather than just to make sure that, perhaps if there's been a ruckus in there. But then you would hope that if it was a girls' toilet, that it would be a lady teacher, a woman teacher, who would come in and put the students at ease by even, just saying, oh, it's Mrs. So-and-so here. I'm just coming in because it sounds like there's something going on. Just so that everyone's at ease, rather than a man teacher or a man of any description, whoever happens to be coming in. So it's all right, I'm just going to use the toilet. And suddenly things that the child have no wish to see and don't need to see is enacted out in front of you, which, as you so rightly and eloquently described, is grotesque. And are teachers aware of this? Are pupils, parents aware of this?
Again, they're a little bit more open to finding out about this type of thing because it's been more public.
Right, more outrage.
They're more aware of that they can be outraged about it. They've got permission to be outraged about it. So parents are a little bit more interested in finding out about this subject, although there's still very much a lot of fear about being called nasty names, transphobic. You're not being inclusive enough. But actually, it sounds nice to be inclusive, but when you dig down and you follow it to its full, you work all the way through, ultimately, you start to talk about including people in places where they should not be. And that's not safe.
Absolutely.
And that's when you need to discriminate on the grounds of health and safety. So it is okay to discriminate if the alternative is harm. So yeah, but that message is far too complicated for primary age school children. All they come out knowing is that you can be whoever you say you want to be, and you must never discriminate against anybody.
This is very bizarre because I mean, the majority of houses in this current, where we are in 2023 as we record this, even though there is a lot of this stuff coming in, the LGBT people themselves are a minority. And so in the majority of houses, daddy is a man, mummy is a woman, assuming you've got both mother and father. And Johnny and Gail, for the sake of argument, are a little boy and a little girl, as is what normal and what used to be the what we for thousands of years understood to be the gender and the sex of those children, and they know that daddy is slightly different from mummy. And when they go to school, to suddenly interrupt what is normal life at home and within their friends and their peers seems to me to be extremely wrong. And also, none of the school's bloody business, is it? Or and the government's business.
No, it isn't. The curriculum is that LGBT content is should be taught at secondary school level to discuss. I mean, really, what they're saying is we should discuss same-sex relationships. Some children have two dads, some children have two mums. Fine.
Hmm.
Um, it's the T at the end of the LGBT that Stonewall use as an umbrella term, which contains, I think, at the last count, 72 different genders. And that's the problem.
Right. And so, I mean, it just seems bizarre that if you are an extreme minority that is not necessarily going to appear in 99% of the schools, why is that suddenly becoming the priority that we identify and talk about those things? Because we don't really do that very much in everything else.
It's, I mean, it's freedom of expression. It's freedom to be who you are, but there are safeguarding
Hmm.
issues around single sex spaces where no matter how you identify, we provide dignity and safety for everybody. And that means male toilets, female toilets, and if that's not comfortable for whatever reason, unisex facilities. But that's it. There's no grey areas there. It's you can't identify into the opposite sex's personal spaces. It's not
No.
safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a bit more of this overreach and stuff coming in, and the sort of progressive agenda trying to, and maybe they give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they feel that they're being discriminated, and for whatever reason. But it seems that school is not really the place. I mean, we're trying to educate kids so that they can grow up and have a holistic and wholesome life and enter the job market and earn a living and be like their parents and have a house and bring children on and do all the things that we think. However, it seems that schools have sort of lost the plot. They become these mini prisons in a way, and teaching a lot of very dubious stuff. So you've gone away from this,
Mm.
and I know a number of my viewers have gone away from this, and we've been talking on a few of the shows about a month or so ago now about homeschooling and coming out of the system and the problems of the schooling system. Tell me how it came about that you decided that you would not only homeschool, that you became a home educator.
So the information that I found, when obviously, well, I'll go back a little bit. There's a reason why I began working at the school, and that was because I wanted to know what was going on in schools. I prior to my daughter starting there, so we'd gone through lockdown, we'd gone through all the Google Classroom expectations that we were supposed to try and recreate school at home, which was terrible. If you've met anybody who's tried to do the
Mm.
homeschool on the Google Classrooms, it's just depressing. It was terrible. We hated it. So we didn't do it. We said there's a better way of learning, and we'll figure it out by ourselves. Thanks very much. So school weren't too thrilled with that because again it messed up the box ticking exercise. They weren't able to put us down as a tick. Um, and again to safeguard to make sure that everything was okay. So we got a phone call instead. And I explained, we're not going to sit in front of a screen for hours a day. We are going to go outside and we're going to do other things. So that experience and that kind of realization that they wanted our children to be sat in front of a screen for hours a day made me think, well, they don't really know my children. They don't really know what's best for my children and my family. I
Yes.
do.
Yes.
I will take responsibility for their education. And again, it planted that seed of mistrust. Actually, your agenda isn't doesn't align with what I want for my children. So it made me think about this again, this digital push to get children on screens, like they're not on them enough already.
Exactly.
So I did apply to work at the secondary school that my daughter was going to, and I thought I'll use this opportunity to find out what schools are about and what's going on. Um, and then we spent a year. She did 1 year in year 7, and we left. And I found an organisation called Education Otherwise, and I think one of your other guests mentioned them as well, which is a fantastic organisation which provides lots of template documents. It talks you through lots of useful information, questions that people have. And obviously, it's, if you don't know anybody else that's doing it, you think, can I do it? Should I do it?
Mm.
What if I get it wrong? But yeah, really, really useful information on there, and connect you with other people and that in your area as well that are doing it too.
This is. Do you think that the lockdown itself was a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of parents to think actually, although, as you say, it was a nightmare because nobody was expecting it and you're not prepared, but
Mm,
you were all locked down. It
mm,
wasn't as. I mean, some people went to work, of course, but some people were forced to work at home, and perhaps a home environment wasn't suitable for that. But for some, do you think that a lot of people have woken up and thought, actually, although it's a big disruption,
mm,
this could be a better way, and perhaps looked into it because it doesn't have to be so rigid as the way
mm.
school is. It's a lot more freedom for children, isn't it?
Well, that was my takeaway from a terrible situation. There's another way of doing things. But then obviously there'll be parents that thought that that was horrendous.
Mm.
I want to get them back to school. The reason it was horrendous was because you were following the school's program. You were trying to recreate school at home, which was the problem. Had you had the confidence to say, no, thank you, we'll do it our own way, then it becomes a lot easier and a lot more accessible and a lot more fun and a lot more valuable experience for your children as well.
What's the just remind viewers what the legal requirements are to homeschool, because I think a lot of people think that it's a lot more stringent than it
Mm.
really is.
So luckily, the organisation Education Otherwise, that's the key. I can't remember the legal terminology, but you have a responsibility to provide an education, a full-time education for your child, and that can be at school or it can be otherwise, education otherwise. So you are in a position to provide your own lessons, your own philosophies, your own way of life. You can pull in the learning from all sorts of different places, and you certainly don't have to follow any school curriculum. You can be child led and find out what they're interested in, and develop those skills to their maximum.
And this is something I think people don't really fully understand, in as much as you feel that you've got to continually let the government know
Mm,
where you are with your child's education, but this is completely separate. You're basically saying, no, 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 I haven't got to teach this LGBT stuff if I don't want to. I can teach my child that they are a boy or girl, and later on, if they want to develop those other ideas, it's entirely up to them. If we do project-based learning, we can find out how maths works and history works based around a project, say, on dinosaurs or something, by counting things, or going out to parks and zoos and experiencing life. And as you say,
mm,
your own philosophy, or if you're religious, your own religion. and not go into this one size fits all
mm,
square peg in a round hole.
mm,
And I think that's where people think, oh my God, I don't think I could cope with the maths that I would have to,
mm, mm,
because some people go, well, I don't understand logarithms and I don't
mm.
understand. We don't have to do any of that.
So, so we again, we're learning as we go, and I'm adapting our daily program, if you like. We haven't got a program, but we're learning as we go. And we started off with a little bit more structure around the English and maths, but now I'm thinking we can bring tutors in later on. We can access examinations if we want to. There are so many options that I don't want to say don't. Well, for us, I'm not going to take anything off the table. It's all in the future. Should my daughter want to access examinations and follow a different path, we can do that.
Mm.
Obviously, there's a financial implication to doing that, but um, we're not talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. It's doable, and it doesn't have to be overwhelmingly expensive. You can be creative and you can find other ways of doing things. The one thing that we did have to do was send a report to the local authority, um, a proposed teaching plan, if you like, just to say what we were doing. But there are templates available that you can adapt to your own.
But
Um,
you don't have visitors coming in and sort of looking over your shoulder to see whether you're doing it the state correct way as demanded
no,
by the government. No, you're
they
just
don't have the power to
yeah.
check up on you and see what you're doing. That one that if you so I think some places ask for you to fill in their form, but you're well entitled. I mean, again, it's just realizing that you have the power to educate your child your way. So I didn't use their form. I wrote my report the way I wanted to do it, and that's what we're doing. And that's as you'll see, that is um, is it a suitable and I can't remember the terminology now, but you have to provide an adequate and suitable education.
Yes. And that's, an adequate and suitable education is a who's judging that?
Yeah,
At the end of the day, it's got to be the parent, hasn't it?
yeah,
The parent, if you're so the parent can basically say, look, this is how I want to educate my child, and it's nothing to do with you, state, government.
yeah, yeah,
You don't own the world.
yeah,
We are sovereign people. Everything that I've been talking about, you realize just how important it is to understand that we have the responsibility and
yeah,
that we are sovereign people
yeah.
and we have the power, as you just so rightly said. How do the children take it? I mean, how are they progressing? Are they flourishing as a result of being educated at home?
Yeah, well, so it's just my eldest at the moment. My
Right.
youngest is she's got the last year of primary school, and she is absolutely loving primary school. She loves her friends, and she's super excited to go to secondary school with her friends. So we've made the decision to give her that opportunity because our eldest had that opportunity. She did a year at secondary. So we'll do that for her and see how she gets on, knowing what I know,
Hmm.
and trying to navigate that as best as we can. Um,
As well as the digital stuff.
exactly. So I won't be allowing photographs and obviously the biometrics. Um, so she's gonna give it a go, and we're open to that. But my eldest, yeah, it really suits her down to the ground. She's really enjoying what we're doing. So yeah,
Fantastic.
it does
Yeah.
have its ups and downs. It's
No,
not
I'm sure it's
always
not all plain. I
yeah,
mean, anybody with kids, just trying to get them to
yeah,
to be
exactly,
motivated on
yeah,
simple things like going out to,
yeah,
on a fun day
yeah.
can be difficult.
Of course it can, yeah. So you just have to um do your best and know that you're coming from the right place, and um yeah, try and just think outside the box a little bit and go that way.
With your eldest, do you find that your eldest is now thinking for herself
I
more?
think I think that's why she didn't fit in at the school really, because she is not going to conform.
Right.
She is an independent person, and she can see what's in front of her face, and yeah, it was never going to be a happy marriage. So
Yeah.
I'm quite confident that she's quite robust to all of the influences. Really, it's my youngest that's probably more susceptible to
She's in
the
the system,
influences.
isn't she? That's the
She,
trouble.
she's more of your typical little
Yeah.
girl that wants to please,
Yeah.
and that brings a lot of worries in that environment.
Yeah, absolutely. School does seem to have changed a hell of a lot, but it's, my attitude to school from observing it from obviously when I went to school and then my children who are now in their 30s is that it is a way of getting people en masse to become obedient people,
Yeah,
obedient workers, and all of that. Whereas we need people to think for themselves and have a different approach to life and be critical thinking about things and thinking, actually, is this really good?
I've
And
just you've just reminded me there, Richard. There was one thing at school that really just I could not believe it. They had a rule that children can't say no and they can't ask why to reasonable demands and by teachers.
there you are.
They
You
can't
have
say
it there.
no
They
and they can't ask
can't say
why.
no. And even if they've got a logic with that, they're not allowed to say no and say my reasons for not wanting to do this or my objection is that. I mean, that is
I mean, it's
evil, isn't it?
dangerous. If you
Yeah.
follow it through all the way, that leads to quite dangerous situations where you can't say no and you can't ask why. I mean, really, is that what we want to teach our young people?
No, I mean that's what the state want them to be able to
Mm,
be as an obedient as possible.
mm,
This has been a very, very enlightening conversation, Emma. Thank you so much for joining me,
pleasure.
and more power to you. Be interesting to find out how your youngest copes down the line. But it's been a huge warning, I think, to parents who've got their kids in now or
Yeah,
are looking to put their kids into school. And of course, neither of us neither of us two are saying you should home ed, but
no.
you should think about it
And you should ask questions.
and you should ask
You
questions.
should ask questions to
Yeah,
find out what's going on and see if it's what you agree with. And if it's not, do your damnedest to get it changed.
yeah. Whilst you can,
Yeah, yeah.
that's the thing. Brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to us. I think this will have opened a lot of people's eyes to the situation, and maybe some schools are going to have some awkward questions to answer, I
Good.
hope. But that's it. That is the role of a parent. They've
It
got to
is.
start
Yeah,
questioning and
yeah,
saying, hang on a minute, is this really necessary? Is this what
yeah,
schooling is about now?
yeah,
Should we be doing this? And making the teachers aware of it, because if the teachers are
yeah,
just going along with
yeah.
it,
I mean, if
then
it's the only way to improve things, Richard, if people challenge it,
yeah,
and if the answer isn't good enough, then perhaps you need to change what you're doing.
absolutely. Yeah, no, you've opened my eyes for sure. Thank you so much, Emma. I really appreciate
Pleasure.
that.
Thank you.
If anybody else has got stories about what's going on in schools or what's happening, I'd be more than happy to welcome you as a guest and talk about it, because I think the next generation is the most important thing at the moment. The education of them, where they're going, how they perceive the world. And all of this stuff, it seems to me, from what Emma has been saying and our observations, is it's grooming a new society that seems to be more and more about conform and beating you rather than having people who are able to think for themselves. So there you go. Anyway, Emma, thanks again. Do join me for another interview on my interview series. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, goodbye.